The day I signed the papers for that old house, my brother laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "Jasmine," he said, shaking his head, "you really paid money for that place. It looks like one strong wind could knock it down." Everyone around the dining table joined him. My mother covered her mouth, trying to hide her smile. My younger sister didn't even try. She pulled out her phone and whispered something to her husband before both of them burst into laughter. Only my grandmother stayed quiet. She looked at me with those gentle brown eyes that had seen more pain than I could imagine. She reached across the table and softly squeezed my hand. "If it brings you peace," she whispered, "then it's already worth more than they can see." Those words stayed with me long after dinner ended, because the truth was, I hadn't bought that house to impress anyone. I bought it because it felt like home. My name is Jasmine Carter. I am 38 years old, a black woman who has spent most of her life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. I worked as a registered nurse for almost 15 years. The shifts were long. Some nights I came home so tired that I slept on the couch without even taking off my shoes. I missed birthdays, holidays, weekends with friends. Every extra dollar I earned went into savings. Not for vacations, not for expensive clothes, not for fancy cars. I dreamed of owning a place where I could finally breathe, a place no one could take away from me. Growing up, our family never had much money. We lived in a small apartment where the walls were so thin that every argument echoed through every room. My father passed away when I was 12. After that, my mother changed. Life became hard, and I know grief can change people. But somewhere along the way, it felt like she stopped seeing me as her daughter and started seeing me as another person who needed something from her. She loved us. I truly believe that. She just didn't always know how to show it. My younger brother, Marcus, could do no wrong. If he made a mistake, someone else was blamed. If I made the smallest mistake, I heard about it for weeks. "You're the oldest," Mom always said. "You should know better." Those words followed me into adulthood. So I learned to stay quiet. I learned to solve my own problems. I learned not to expect anyone to celebrate my victories. Maybe that's why buying that old house meant so much. No one helped me save for it. No one paid the down payment. No one believed I could do it. I did it alone. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, hidden behind tall oak trees. The white paint had faded years ago. The porch leaned a little to one side. Some windows were covered with wooden boards. Wildflowers had grown across the front yard as if nature had decided to protect the place after everyone else gave up on it. Most people saw an abandoned building. I saw sunlight pouring through wide windows. I saw children playing in the backyard one day. I saw family dinners around a large wooden table. Most of all, I saw hope. The realtor looked surprised when I smiled during the tour. "You know this house needs a lot of work," she warned. I nodded. "I know." "The roof will probably need replacing." "I know." "The plumbing isn't perfect." "I know." She finally stopped talking. "So why this house?" I looked around the quiet living room. The old fireplace still stood proudly against the wall. The wooden staircase curved toward the second floor with a kind of elegance you don't often see anymore. Even covered in dust, the house felt warm. "It still has a heartbeat," I answered. She smiled. I've never heard anyone describe a house that way. Neither had I, but somehow it felt true. The following Saturday, my family insisted on seeing what I had bought. Marcus joked the entire drive. "I hope you brought helmets," he laughed. "The ceiling might collapse." My sister giggled from the back seat. Mom simply sighed. "I just don't understand why you couldn't buy a normal house." I didn't answer. Some battles aren't worth fighting. When we finally pulled into the long driveway, everyone became strangely quiet. The house stood exactly as I remembered it. Old, weathered, proud, I stepped out of my car with the keys resting in my hand. My heart was beating faster than it had in years, not because I was nervous, because I finally felt like I belonged somewhere. Behind me, Marcus laughed one more time. "Well, Jasmine," he said, "let's see what you wasted your life savings on." I smiled without saying a word. Then I walked toward the front door. Slowly, carefully, and when I slid the old key into the lock, I had no idea that what waited on the other side would leave every single one of them completely speechless. For a moment, nobody moved. The old front door let out a long, tired creak as it slowly opened inward. Dust floated through the air where sunlight streamed through the tall windows. The smell of old wood, faded paint, and memories filled the room. Marcus stepped inside first. He looked around and laughed. "I told you," he said. "This place is falling apart." My sister, Danielle, wrinkled her nose. "It smells old. Jasmine, how could you buy something like this?" Mom walked in behind them, shaking her head. "Oh, sweetheart," she sighed. "This is much worse than I imagined." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked farther into the house. Every floorboard creaked beneath my feet, but I wasn't afraid. I had already spent weeks studying the inspection report. I knew exactly what needed fixing and what could stay. The walls were faded. The wallpaper had peeled away in places. The furniture left behind was covered with white sheets, but none of that bothered me. I could already picture fresh paint on the walls. I imagined warm lights hanging from the ceiling. I imagined music playing while dinner cooked in the kitchen. Most people only saw what the house was. I saw what it could become. Marcus wandered into the dining room. He knocked lightly on one of the walls. "You'll spend more fixing this place than buying it." Danielle laughed. "You should have just bought a nice apartment." Mom looked around the room before turning toward me. "You've always worked so hard, Jasmine. I just don't understand why you would throw your savings away." Her words hurt, not because they were cruel, because she truly believed them. She couldn't see what I saw. I took a slow breath. "This house isn't perfect," I said quietly. "Neither am I," nobody replied. Outside, the wind gently pushed against the old windows. For a second, the entire house seemed peaceful. Then Grandma slowly walked through the front door. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't looking at the cracked walls. She wasn't looking at the dusty floors. She was looking at the details. Her fingers gently brushed across the carved wooden staircase. She smiled. "They don't build homes like this anymore." I smiled back. "I thought the same thing." She nodded. "This wood is over 100 years old." Marcus rolled his eyes. "It's still an old dump." Grandma didn't even look at him. "No," she answered softly. "It's history." The room became quiet. I followed Grandma into the living room. The large stone fireplace reached almost to the ceiling. Above it hung an old wooden frame with nothing inside. She stood there for nearly a minute without speaking. Then she whispered something I almost didn't hear. "This house was loved." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She gently touched the fireplace. "You can always tell." I wasn't sure how, but somehow, I believed her. While everyone continued making jokes, I walked into the kitchen. The cabinets were old but solid. The sink sat beneath a wide window overlooking the backyard. Outside stood the biggest oak tree I had ever seen. Its branches stretched across almost half the yard. I imagined hanging a swing there someday. Maybe one day, children would laugh beneath those branches. That thought made me smile. My family probably thought I was dreaming. Maybe I was, but dreams had carried me through harder days than this. After almost an hour, everyone started heading back toward the front door. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, little sis, good luck." Danielle shook her head. "I hope you didn't spend everything." Mom hugged me before leaving. "If you change your mind," she said, "maybe you can sell it before it's too late." I hugged her back. "I'll be okay." She smiled, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Soon every car pulled away. The driveway became silent. Only Grandma stayed behind. She sat with me on the old front porch as the evening sun painted the sky orange. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she reached into her purse. I almost forgot. She handed me a small brass key. It looked much older than the key I had used to unlock the front door. I frowned. "What's this for?" Grandma smiled in that quiet way only she could. "I found it in your grandfather's things after he passed." I looked at the tiny key. "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because," she said, looking toward the house, "I think it belongs here." A chill ran through my body. "What makes you say that?" She stared at the old house for a long moment before answering. "Years ago, before you were born, your grandfather used to talk about a beautiful old home on Maple Street." My heartbeat slowed. "He never told us where it was." She looked back at me. "But the moment I walked inside today." She gently closed my fingers around the tiny brass key. I realized this was the house he was talking about. I looked down at the worn key resting in my hand. It was old, heavy, covered with tiny scratches from another lifetime, and somehow, I had the strange feeling it was about to unlock far more than just an old door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on an old air mattress in the living room, staring at the ceiling while the house settled around me. Every now and then, I heard the soft creak of old wood or the wind brushing against the windows. Some people would have been frightened. I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone, but not lonely. Grandma's little brass key rested on the table beside me. Every time I looked at it, I wondered the same thing. What does it open? The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Golden light spilled through the dusty windows, making the old house glow in a way it hadn't the day before. I made myself a cup of instant coffee using a small electric kettle I had brought from my apartment. Standing by the kitchen window, I looked across the backyard. The giant oak tree swayed gently in the morning breeze. Birds sang from its branches. Everything felt peaceful. After breakfast, I decided to begin cleaning. I tied my hair back, put on old work gloves, and started with the living room. Dust covered almost everything. Old books sat on broken shelves. Picture frames leaned against the walls, their photographs long gone. I carefully folded old sheets and opened every window to let fresh air inside. Hour after hour, the house slowly began to breathe again. By afternoon, I had filled several trash bags. Sweat rolled down my face, but I didn't mind. Every clean corner made me feel one step closer to home. As I swept beneath the staircase, my broom struck something hard. Clink! I stopped. Looking down, I noticed a small metal ring hidden beneath years of dust. I knelt and brushed the dirt away. It wasn't just a ring. It was attached to a tiny wooden door built into the side of the staircase. I had walked past it several times without noticing. The door was no bigger than a small cabinet. It had no handle. Only an old keyhole. My heart began beating faster. I reached into my pocket, the brass key. Slowly, I slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly. For a second, I simply stared. Grandma had been right. Taking a deep breath, I turned the key. Click! The little door opened with a soft groan. Inside was a narrow storage space. At first, I thought it was empty. Then I noticed an old wooden box sitting in the back corner. It was covered in dust. Carefully, I carried it into the living room. The box wasn't locked. As I lifted the lid, a faint smell of aged paper drifted into the room. Inside were dozens of letters. Every envelope had been tied together with faded blue ribbon. There were also several black and white photographs. I picked one up. It showed a smiling black family standing proudly in front of this very house. A father, a mother, 3 children, everyone looked happy. I turned the picture over. Written neatly on the back were the words, "The Carter Family, Summer 1968. I froze. Carter, that was my last name. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Thousands of families share the same surname. Still, something inside me whispered that it wasn't. I carefully opened one of the letters. The handwriting was beautiful. The paper had turned yellow with age. The first line made my hands tremble. To whoever finds this house one day, I swallowed hard. The letter continued. If these walls are still standing, then perhaps hope has survived too. I sat down without realizing it. Outside, the wind rustled the oak tree. The house was completely silent. The writer explained how their family had built a life filled with love inside these walls. Birthday parties, Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, every room held a memory. Then everything changed. Financial hardship forced them to leave. The hardest part wasn't losing the house. It was leaving behind the life they had built. Tears slowly filled my eyes. I understood that feeling. Not because I had lost a house, because I had spent years searching for a place where I truly belonged. Maybe that's why this home had spoken to me from the very beginning. I reached deeper into the box. Beneath the letters lay a leather folder. Inside were old property papers. Names, dates, official documents. One name immediately caught my attention. Isaiah Carter, my grandfather's name. I stared at the page in disbelief. "No," I whispered. "This can't be." My grandfather had always refused to talk about his childhood. Whenever anyone asked, he simply smiled and changed the subject. Grandma once told me he carried painful memories he never wanted to revisit. Was this what he had been hiding? Had this house once belonged to our family? My heart pounded as the pieces slowly began fitting together. This wasn't just an abandoned house. This wasn't just an old investment. Without knowing it, I had somehow bought back a piece of my own family's history. And suddenly, my brother's laughter, my mother's doubts, my sister's jokes, none of them mattered anymore. Because I knew something they didn't. This old house had been waiting for someone to come home, and somehow, after all these years, that someone was me. For several minutes, I just sat there holding the old property papers in my hands. The afternoon sunlight poured through the living room windows, making the yellowed pages glow. My grandfather's name, Isaiah Carter, was still right there in front of me. It wasn't a dream. This house had once belonged to my family. 1,000 questions filled my mind. Why had Grandpa never told us? Why had he let everyone believe our family had no history here? And why did this house end up forgotten for so many years? I reached for my phone and called Grandma. She answered on the second ring. "Jasmine? Grandma, I found something." My voice shook. "What is it, sweetheart?" I found Grandpa's name. There was silence, not the kind of silence where someone has nothing to say. The kind where old memories suddenly come rushing back. After a long pause, Grandma whispered, "I was afraid you would." "You knew?" "I suspected." I closed my eyes. "Please tell me the truth." Grandma took a slow breath. "When your grandfather was a young man, his parents owned that house. They worked hard for everything they had. Your great-grandfather was a carpenter, and your great-grandmother taught music lessons from the front room." I looked around the living room. I could almost imagine children laughing while soft piano music filled the house. But Grandma continued, "Times were different back then." Her voice became quieter. "There were people who didn't want a black family living in one of the nicest homes in town." A lump formed in my throat. They were threatened. They were treated unfairly. They lost work. And eventually, she stopped speaking. They couldn't keep the house. I looked down at the old photographs lying beside me. So Grandpa never wanted to talk about it. No, he believed remembering would only bring pain. Tears filled my eyes. He spent the rest of his life trying to build something new. He wanted his children and grandchildren to look forward, not backward. After we ended the call, I sat quietly for a long time. Suddenly, every room felt different. This wasn't just wood and brick. These walls had witnessed joy, heartbreak, hope, and loss. That evening, I decided to keep cleaning. The more I worked, the closer I felt to the family members I had never met. I polished the old staircase. I cleaned the fireplace. I carefully washed every dusty window. Slowly, the house began shining again. A few days later, I invited my family back, not because I wanted to prove them wrong, because I wanted them to know the truth. They arrived just before sunset. Marcus stepped out of his truck first. "I see you've already spent a fortune fixing this place." I smiled. "Not really." Danielle looked around in surprise. "I have to admit, it already looks better." Mom walked onto the porch without saying anything. Her eyes moved slowly across the freshly cleaned windows, the flower beds, the repaired front steps. "This doesn't even look like the same house," she said softly. I unlocked the front door. Everyone walked inside. This time, nobody laughed. The sunlight filled every room. The polished wooden floors reflected a warm golden light. The old staircase looked beautiful again. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table. The house still wasn't perfect. Far from it. But now it felt alive. Marcus slowly looked around. "I didn't think this place could ever look like this." I smiled. "It just needed someone to believe in it." He didn't answer. Instead, he quietly walked toward the fireplace. Mom stood beside one of the old family photographs I had framed and placed on the mantel. She frowned. "Who are these people?" I handed her the picture. She stared at it, then her eyes became wide. "Wait." She looked at me. "Why do they look so familiar?" Without saying a word, I handed her the property papers. She slowly read the names. Her hands began trembling. "No," she whispered. "This can't be." "It can," I replied gently. "This house belonged to Grandpa's family." The room became completely silent. Marcus took the papers. Danielle looked over his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. For the first time in years, my brother had nothing to joke about. My sister had nothing to criticize. My mother simply stood there, tears quietly rolling down her face. "I never knew," she whispered. "I didn't either." Grandma slowly walked into the room behind everyone. She smiled as she looked around the house. Then she rested one hand on the old fireplace. "Isaiah," she whispered softly, "we finally brought your family home." No one spoke. No one laughed. No one moved. The silence inside that old house wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was peaceful. It felt like generations of pain had finally found a place to rest. And in that quiet moment, I realized something that mattered far more than proving my family wrong. I hadn't just restored an old house. I had restored a forgotten piece of our family's heart. For the next few weeks, my life settled into a peaceful routine. Every morning before leaving for the hospital, I spent a few minutes working on the house. Some days I painted walls. Other days I planted flowers along the front porch or polished old wooden furniture I found in the attic. Little by little, the house came back to life. The neighbors began stopping by. An elderly woman named Mrs. Aliner introduced herself one afternoon while I was trimming the hedges. "I've waited a long time to see someone care for this house again," she said with a warm smile. "You remember it?" I asked. She nodded. "Oh, yes." She looked toward the porch with misty eyes. "I was just a little girl when the Carter family lived here." I smiled. "They were my family." Her eyes filled with surprise. "I knew it." She laughed softly. "I told my husband there was something familiar about you." For almost an hour, she shared stories I had never heard before. She remembered my great-grandmother handing out homemade cookies to neighborhood children. She remembered my great-grandfather helping neighbors repair broken fences without asking for money. "They weren't rich," Mrs. Aliner said, "but everyone on this street respected them." Hearing those words filled a place inside my heart that had been empty for years. A few days later, my mother came to visit alone. She stood quietly on the porch holding a small cardboard box. "I found these while cleaning my attic," she said. Inside were old family photographs, Grandpa's pocket watch, and a faded notebook. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I looked up. "For what?" She lowered her eyes. "For laughing. For not believing in you. For always thinking you were making the wrong choice." She wiped away a tear. I spent so much of my life trying to survive that I forgot how to dream. I gently took her hands. You don't have to apologize for everything. But I want to. She smiled through her tears. You reminded me that sometimes the best things don't look perfect at first. For the first time in many years, I hugged my mother without carrying old hurt inside my heart. It felt different. Lighter. A week later, Marcus surprised me. He pulled his truck into the driveway early Saturday morning. Without saying much, he climbed into the truck bed and unloaded several boxes of tools. What are those for? I asked. He scratched the back of his neck. I figured, your porch still needs work. I smiled. I thought you called this place a dump. He laughed. I did. Then his smile faded. I was wrong. For the next several weekends, we worked side by side. We repaired railings, built flower boxes, painted fences. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we worked in comfortable silence. It felt like we were rebuilding more than a house. We were rebuilding our family. As summer arrived, I decided to host our first family dinner inside the restored dining room, the same room where everyone had laughed months before. Now the table was covered with fresh flowers, warm food, and candles. Children laughed in the backyard beneath the giant oak tree. Music played softly through the open windows. The house felt exactly as I had imagined on the very first day, full of life. Halfway through dinner, Grandma slowly stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon. I'd like to say something. The room became quiet. She looked around at every face before resting her eyes on me. When Jasmine first bought this house, she began, most of us only saw broken windows. She smiled. But Jasmine saw possibilities. She turned toward me. Real strength isn't seeing beauty after everyone else notices it. It's seeing beauty when nobody else believes it's there. No one spoke. Even Marcus looked down at his plate. Grandma continued. This house didn't just need repairs. Our family did too. A peaceful silence filled the room. Then, one by one, everyone raised their glasses, not because of the house, because of what it had brought back to us. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I stepped onto the front porch. The stars filled the night sky. A warm breeze moved gently through the oak tree. I sat in Grandpa's old rocking chair, holding his pocket watch in my hand. For the first time, I understood why he never spoke about this place. Some memories hurt too deeply to explain, but I also realized something else. Healing doesn't always come from forgetting the past. Sometimes, healing begins when someone is brave enough to return, open the door, and fill an empty house with love once again. I looked at the warm light shining through my living room windows. This old house had given me something far greater than walls and a roof. It had given me my family's forgotten story. It had healed relationships I thought were broken forever. And it had reminded me that true value is rarely found in perfect appearances. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden beneath peeling paint, cracked wood, and years of silence. You just need the courage to see what everyone else has forgot. That night, before going inside, I looked back at the house one last time. Then I smiled, because I finally understood something simple but powerful. People may laugh at your dreams when they only see the outside. But if you stay faithful to what you believe in, one day those same people will stand quietly in front of the life you built, wishing they had seen what you saw from the very beginning.